right, welcome back. Um, Actually, I hope you got. I'll tell you a quick thing. I've been on the road for 3 days now. I was going to say, I hope you guys appreciate that I'm here today, but there's a story there. I've been on the road. I joined the Jason Levine show just temporarily, going on the road with Jason and a few other great speakers, Tanya Clemens and Angela Tabak. I went to Drumheller on Monday, Leduc on Tuesday. Last night was Red Deer, and I rushed back to Calgary to do the show. So hope you appreciate that. And let me tell you, it was a white knuckle drive last night. Maybe I should have stayed overnight in Red Deer and come back this morning, but it was a white knuckle drive. Question for you guys. I used to trust what we call professional drivers, right? Here in Alberta, you see guys on the roads all the time, like professional drivers, the guys driving the big rigs, right? It's a tradition in Alberta. Lots of guys drive trucks. We need them to deliver equipment up in the field, big hauls, big loads, and stuff like that. But am I the only one now who feels a little nervous around some of these big trucks these days? Something's not right, and I think we all know what it is, right? I mean, I got yesterday there was trucks driving with their blinkers on, and then you have the other extreme. You have trucks that are driving at full speed in the blizzard, and there's like the in between is missing, and I'm like staying away from the big trucks. Maybe it's me, but I don't feel good about around being what used to be called professional drivers. You saw the show here today. Before I come here in studio, John always asks me what I kind of want to talk about so he can prepare the title, the thumbnail, and I wanted to talk about bilingualism. I like the title, how he said Ottawa's bilingualism obsession. It's a much nicer title than what I had suggested. So let's get into that. While I was on the road, I heard about this horrible accident that happened in New York. The plane that hit the emergency vehicle on the runway at LaGuardia. I mean, absolutely terrible. I don't even know how that can happen. Luckily, it only happens, extremely rarely, like every 30 or 40 years. So it's not, there might have been near misses, but an actual impact between a vehicle and a plane is extremely rare. We don't know much about what led to the tragedy. They're going to investigate it, and we'll learn about it eventually. But I want to just start the show with this clip from Mark Carney, and we're going to play the whole clip. At first, we thought we'd only play 30 seconds of it, the one that really annoyed me. But let's play the whole clip.
First, I want to repeat my sincere condolences to the families, to the friends, to the work colleagues of the two young pilots, Monsieur Forêt and Monsieur Gunter, d'Air Canada, of Air Canada, whose actions save lives. We proudly live in a bilingual country. And companies like Air Canada particularly have a responsibility to always communicate in both official languages, regardless of the situation. I'm very disappointed in, as others are, rightly so, in this unilingual message of the CEO of Air Canada. It doesn't matter the circumstance, but particularly in these circumstances, lack of judgment, a lack of compassion.
So, I don't know how you guys feel about that, but there's a couple of things to unpack on there, but that upsets me, right? So let's think about this, right? The country is struggling right now. We got all sorts of issues. There's a conflict going on in the Middle East. We got prices of gasoline soaring, prices of food soaring. People have no discretionary income. Traveling is down, so forth. And then somewhere in this whole mess, you got a president of a company who's dealing with the fact that one of his planes hit a vehicle on a runway, and two of his pilots got killed, and a bunch of passengers got injured. And the poor president of Air Canada, who is like, I've been in almost similar, I can't even say I've been in similar situations. I've been in stressful situations as the president of a company. I can't imagine what this guy's facing, the president of Air Canada, because he's on the national stage, right? Everybody's noticing this. And the poor guy comes on a radio or television, does a press conference, and the guy is naturally Anglophone, unilingual, right? And he makes his statement in English. And then, and so on top of his tragedy and everything that's going on in this poor guy's life, Carney and the Liberals decide that now's the time to make an example of that guy. And they're bringing him into a committee. They want him in front of a committee to explain to the committee why he didn't make his statement in both official languages. And so, and I just want to unpack that a little bit, right? So, and then you hear Carney say, "We live in a bilingual country." Yeah, we live in an officially bilingual country, but let's be real here, right? And I'm a francophone. I speak French. It's my native tongue, and I'm a Franco-Ontarian who moved to Alberta, and now I consider myself an Albertan, and I have francophone roots, and I know there's a lot of Albertans who speak French, right? But is the country really bilingual? No. I mean, there's like 15 million Quebecers that speak French and English, and then the rest of us speak English mostly. So the country and and we have this official bilingual country, and then we have all these crazy rules because of it, right? So the House of Commons every day, even though Quebecers represent about 15% of the population, if that, almost half the business in the House of Commons is done in French, right? They almost always open their comments with French. We spend an incredible amount of money by translating everything, and the federal government offering services in French across the board. It doesn't matter where you live, right? So if you live in Drayton Valley, somebody at the post, if you go to the post office in Drayton Valley, you will see that there will be little signs. You know, you go to the Drayton Valley office to pick up a passport application, and you'll see that they're there in English and in French. And then the signs explaining things and the prices and everything, it's all bilingual, but you're in Drayton Valley, Alberta, where there might be, you know, a handful of people that speak French. But it goes beyond that, right? And this bilingualism costs us a lot of money. Definitely has an impact on our productivity, but it goes beyond that, right? So why did Carney say that he expected the president of Air Canada to speak in French? Well, Air Canada is a private company. It started out as a crown corporation, but in 1989 or somewhere around there, it went full private. It's a full private company. You can go to you can buy Air Canada on the Toronto Stock Exchange. It is not a public company, or sorry, it's a public company. It's not private, but it is not a government corporation. But it falls under federal jurisdiction rules because it's a transportation company. Then it has to follow transportation rules that are managed by the government, right? So that's why when you get on the plane, they do the safety briefing. They do it in both languages, French and English. So companies like Air Canada fall under those rules, WestJet, Via Rail. But what other kinds of companies fall under those kinds of rules? The banking industry is regulated federally, which means that banks in this country have to offer services in both languages. The communications industry is federally regulated. In fact, I'm wondering, do we here at the Western Standard have to provide services in both languages? I don't think so, because we're sort of, maybe we do. I don't know. But I guarantee you that Rogers and TELUS and other big companies like that are federally regulated have to provide services in both language, as do banks. You see where I'm going, right? And so so there's one thing to be federally regulated to offer services in both language. I think it's going a little too far to expect that the president of one of those companies has to be perfectly bilingual and offer his condolences in a tragedy in both languages. And I'm sure he was going to do it, and I'm sure there were press releases and statements in both languages, but as he spoke, it wasn't done in both languages. But lastly, the thing I want to talk about is the hypocrisy of somebody like Carney criticizing somebody else. Because did you see in the clip what Carney does, right? He opens his statement in English, but then he switches to French. And what did he switch to French? He mentioned the names of the pilots, and he, and they'll use token words, merci or beaucoup or whatever. They'll throw a little tidbit in French. Trust me, Mark Carney is not bilingual. And I mean, he can barely read something that's given to him in French, and he'll do it and he butchers it, but you're not going to have a conversation one-on-one with Mark Carney in French. You're certainly not going to have a conversation with the Governor General of Canada and a whole bunch of other dignitaries and politicians, right? So there's a double standard there that was there today that I don't like in that video. And lastly, I want to talk about this one other thing. So I'm a francophone, but I'm being very blunt here. I think the bilingualism in this country has gone too far. And I think today that was an example of that, or yesterday. This is more pandering to Quebec. maybe it might even lead to the fact that they'll appoint somebody, they'll force the guy from Air Canada to resign only so they can appoint somebody else who's more bilingual, which is my last point I want to talk about on this, is that that is one of the other constraints of having a bilingual country that annoys me, which is a lot of positions, whether they're in senior government or in the courts or deputy ministers, the army, the RCMP, crown corporations, stuff like that. There's a bilingual requirement that I think is unfair. And as an example, you will not climb the ranks in this organization in the Canadian military if you're not bilingual. If you go to Saint Jean, you go to the military college there, and you graduate. If you're Anglophone, they'll make you take enough French to just pass. But if you don't progress and your French really doesn't improve, you've limited yourself. So it's another form of discrimination, I think, in this country, forcing everybody to be bilingual. Anyways, call in. Let me know what your thoughts are on that. I've spoken a lot, but again, as I've said before, this is your show, right? So call in. You see the number there on the screen. We don't have I'll repeat it again. We don't have a switchboard. So if you call, let me know your name, where you're calling from, what you want to talk about. In some instances, I'll keep you on the line. In other instances, I'll ask you to please hang up so we can take another caller. But while we're waiting for a call, I will, if you want to put that post on the screen, please, John. I got a comment from somebody says, my main issue, so it's from Prairie Kozak, says, my main issue with bilingualism is that it forces the federal government to operate on barely 20% of the available talent pool. Exactly. That's what I just said, right? Whether it's the military, senior jobs, right? You won't get a job as a deputy minister in Canada federally if you're not fluent in both languages, which is a shame. And I guess your reference there to 20% is about the distribution of people who are bilingual in this country. Hey, they could say you need to speak multiple languages in order to get a senior role. I'd be okay with that, right? If you're going to be working at, I don't know, foreign affairs and you want to roll as a diplomat, then sure, it's appropriate to, you want to be posted in Poland. You might as well put a requirement that you need to speak Polish and English. But to automatically make every job past a certain level be bilingual, I think that's I agree that restricts it shrinks the talent pool, especially in the military. In the military and in the RCMP, it really, 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 really shrinks the talent pool. All our senior commanders and senior officers are have to be bilingual. Any other? So yeah, don't be shy, folks. Give me a call, and then we'll go from there. But thanks for that comment. So what else happened while I was gone, which is an interesting thing. So I've been on the road, like I said, doing these speaking engagements. They take about 3 hours every night. They've been well attended. But I get a little bit disconnected while I was there. One of the cool things that happened while was when I was on the road is Keith Wilson came to one of our events. Always a pleasure chatting with Keith Wilson. You guys know Keith, right? He's an Alberta lawyer from up in the Edmonton area. Became popular during the trucking convoy. You often see him alongside Tamara Litch. And he's kind of I think he's officially counsel for the Alberta Prosperity Project. So he'll be one of the people strategizing on how to deal with this injunction that's approaching here on April 7th. But the more interesting news that I learned this week is that Keith is going to debate Jason Kenney in the coming weeks. And that's going to be awesome. There's going to be so good on Jason for agreeing to do this. And good on Keith for agreeing to do this. And they're going to debate in Edmonton, and they're going to debate down here in Calgary. So I don't have specifics. Maybe John can find something while I'm talking on that. But that's going to be definitely an interesting thing. Keith came to one of our events. He was there in Leduc on Tuesday night. And we put him on the spot, and we asked Keith to come up and talk. And Keith brought up some really interesting perspective that I hadn't thought of, focused around the conflict in Iran right now and the problems with the Strait of Hormuz, right? So that's still ongoing over there. And the full flow of oil hasn't resumed yet. So we're all seeing that. We're seeing the problems here in Alberta. I paid as much as $1.79 for gas this week, which is crazy. And but then we were talking. I guess right now New Zealand is almost to the point of having to ration fuels like gasoline and diesel and jet fuel, and so is New Zealand, and so is a few other countries. Right, a few other countries that did this weird transition to green and went too fast on it and shut down some of their industries or slowed them down, similar to what we were trying to do here in our country. Those places are hurting. Luckily, we still have we have 5 refineries here in Alberta, so there's no shortage. There won't be any shortage of the fuels and the but we're paying a higher price because the commodity is traded on the free markets. But then Keith also brought up that now the rest of the world is starting to panic because the other thing that travels through the Strait of Hormuz are things like fertilizer. And I hadn't really paused to think about that. Again, we're blessed here in Canada with a ton of good fertilizers, right? We have potash in Saskatchewan, and then here in Alberta, uh, in the process of producing our natural gas, there's we maybe you've heard the term sour natural gas. Like we refer to it as sweet and sour natural gas, and the sour natural gas is the gas that has hydrogen sulfide and carbon dioxide in it in large quantities, but it mostly refers to hydrogen sulfide. And here in Alberta, we take out that sour component, that toxic hydrogen sulfide, and then we turned it into sulfur, elemental sulfur. Some of you who are old enough remember driving by Crossfield north of Calgary maybe 20 years ago when you'd see the big yellow piles along the highway there. Well, that was sulfur. We used to produce too much sulfur, more than the markets needed. So we would actually just pour it in blocks and stockpile it there. And there's some big stockpiles in Vancouver and places like that. But over time, the world caught up and sulfur became a commodity that became rarer and rarer. And so sulfur is used to make fertilizer, and it's also used to make sulfuric acid, which is one of the most important inorganic chemicals in the world. So anyway, so we have an abundance of sulfur and we have an abundance of potash and ammonia, right? Ammonia is pretty simple to make. It's nitrogen and hydrogen combined in the right way. So, three things that the world needs in big quantities: natural gas, oil, and fertilizers. They make the world go round, and now they're all becoming in quick, short supply. And guess who has all of those things? But we have so much of it that we could produce even more, and we could supply some to the rest of the world. So it's very Keith brought up a good point, but it's very frustrating to to see that we've been unprepared for some of these events. We should, I said that the election of Donald Trump should have been a wake up call. What's happening in the Gulf should be another wake up call, and I hope that we'll take that wake up call to and seriously and keep and I'll come back to that. Keep promoting our industries. Just going to go through a couple of comments here. What have we got here? I'm a senior that relies on Canada Post for communications over the miles and provinces with family, a friend. Could you suggest an alternative for my or our letters and cards, please? Well, the internet. You can email things. I mean, that's a question. That's a question that comes up a lot when people are, with Canada Post going on strike several times in the last couple of years. Well, yeah, I think I answered the question. I mean, the alternatives are all there. It's the internet, or it's alternatives like Purelator and whatnot. And I think in the short term, Canada Post has to realize that the services they're offering are a little bit too expensive. And I'm not saying go away completely, Canada Post, but maybe once a week instead of daily delivery. We do have a call on the line. All right, let's go to the caller name and where are you calling from, please?
Hello, Marty. It's Randy from Pony Plains.
Hey, Randy, how's it going?
Good, great podcast. intelligent discussion. There's no wasted words and no fluff. I love it. So a few years ago, I visited my brother-in-law, a business owner in Peace River. He's a lifelong Grant and Rachel Notley fan. So we're walking across the pedestrian path on the new vehicle bridge across the mighty Peace River.
Okay.
He had an interesting comment. He said that conservatives have been talking about building this bridge for 2 decades, and the NDP got it done during this term in power. They've also shut down the coal plants, even the new low emission Keephills through. They began the carbon tax, even without running on it during the election. And Justin Trudeau said that gave him the courage and impetus to introduce the federal carbon tax. So my brother-in-law says the NDP gets things done. And we're paying dearly for this debt. And here we are in 2026, we can't even get a beneficial Alberta pension plan. Even though the premier ran on it, twice been given membership mandate as per our Westminster system. Plus, last year she got positive feedback with the Alberta Next panel. I also believe, I know she's really interested in referendum, but a referendum on the APP, while being noble, I don't think it'll work out because legacy media will control its outcomes. It feels like the NDP is steering the bus.
Yeah, no,
Your thoughts?
no, great comment, and I agree. I don't agree with the policies a lot of times of the NDP or the Liberals or the Socialists, but I do agree that the NDP in some instances act pretty quickly, and it is a warning that I've made to maybe we're leading to that, right? It's a warning that it's a part that I don't like of say Danielle Smith, who's constantly studying a problem and saying I'm doing my due diligence, and never progressing somewhere. And I think she's genuine in that approach. She's trying to do the right thing because she knows she's going to criticize if she doesn't check off all the boxes. But on the other side, yes, if Nenshi gets reelected, he's not going to do that due diligence. He's going to fly with his mandate, and we're going to see changes quickly. Is that kind of where you were heading with your comment, or?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. No, appreciate the call, Randy. Anything else, or?
No, that's good. Thank you.
All right.
Day.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm just gonna, while we wait for another caller, I'm just gonna go to one comment there. Somebody said, Marty, I think the best thing for Canada can do is to go to single operating language. Listen, that's not what I was advocating for in terms of bilingualism, right? I do agree that I'm not going to dispute the fact that the country is bilingual, and I'm not going to dispute the fact that we need to offer certain services in both languages. As frustrating as it is, I think the House of Commons, the proceedings of the House of Commons will continue to be in both languages. Laws will be translated, and I can read the laws in both languages, and so forth and so forth. I agree with that. But I think we need to get reasonable and reduce the requirements. As an example, I don't think it should be a requirement to be perfectly bilingual to become a senior officer in the Canadian Army. I don't think it should be an absolute requirement that every post office across the country have somebody on staff who can speak French, right? I think we need to apply it in a much more reasonable way because it's getting out of hand on us. Which is one thing, but I also think that it is being used, like we saw it this week. I think it is being used often as a disguised way to transfer benefits to Quebec. So that, and that's kind of the angle I was going with that. I mean, the fact that back to the jobs, right? Most of the senior jobs go to Quebecers, and I think it's a form of discrimination that benefits Quebec a lot more than anybody else. So that's what I was advocating for. I'm not advocating for a unilingual country. Could be worse. You got countries like I think Switzerland has 4 official languages. Actually, that'd be an interesting comment. I don't know if somebody knows that. How many countries in the world operate in 2 languages? I don't know how many. Actually, interestingly enough, the pilots that flew, one of them was a Quebecer, but he had to learn English because in the airline industry, that's an example where around the world, English is the official language of air traffic, right? Every pilot in the world has to learn to speak English to be able to communicate with the towers and places like that. I mean, that's a real problem, right? You're traveling you're crossing borders, you're going all around the world. So if you want to be an international pilot, you have to speak both languages. If you're just gonna, I guess, if you're fly for Chinese Airlines and you just fly domestically, then I imagine they just talk to each other in Chinese on those flights. But yeah, who knows? Well, let's stay or not on politics. Let's stay on energy a little bit. I saw yesterday press release coming out that let me get the wording exactly here, or maybe John can find the press release on Danielle Smith and Ottawa, an agreement in principle on methane emissions. Another one of those things that I want to unpack, right? So, what's that agreement in principle? Again, it's apparently we are expected to reduce our methane emissions in Canada, but be careful when you look at that, right? First, they started with carbon dioxide emissions, right? So everybody had to reduce carbon dioxide emissions. By the way, and that's, to me, that's bogus science, right? Carbon dioxide is a trace element, almost inert. It's in very small quantities in the atmosphere, and they accused it of being the culprit behind climate change, even though it's a minuscule amount. So then they passed the carbon tax, and the carbon tax became immensely unpopular, and Carney had to reverse the carbon tax, right? He used almost those exact words. It's an unpopular tax, and we're reversing it. The reason is it was unpopular is because they couldn't achieve what they were going to do with the carbon tax. And at first, they thought it was convenient. We're just going to charge the biggest emitters of carbon dioxide a tax, which happens to be Alberta, right? Hey, how convenient that the biggest producers of carbon dioxide emission is Alberta. And so let's pass a carbon tax across the country, but we're mostly going to collect it from Alberta. Turns out it's an unpopular thing, so they reverse it. So we're positively affected by that. They're addicted to the revenues and to the money and to this insane narrative that they're going to that they're going to control climate. So they need some other boogeyman. So now they're turning their attention to methane. So now they're going to try and make us believe that methane. And methane, by the way, is just natural gas, right? And most natural gas, we burn it into a furnace, and then it becomes carbon dioxide and water vapor. But some methane also escapes. As an example, when you're fueling your car in California, they've been doing this for a long time, right? When you go to fuel your car with gasoline in California, you have this little vacuum pump there that's making sure that when you open your cap, there's not leakage of vapors going up into atmosphere. That's what they're doing there. They're trying to capture methane and other volatile compounds. So yesterday, Carney and Smith announced this understanding. So 6 months ago, their carbon tax is is off the table, but now we're replacing it with this methane equivalent, which again, conveniently is mostly a problem in Alberta. So they're mostly going to try and get money out of Alberta. And I'll tell you this, I'll tell you very pragmatically, the thing that scares me about this is that they want to reduce methane back to like pre-2013 levels by some year in the future, right? Well, this isn't new. Okay. We've been trying to reduce methane in Alberta forever, for as long as I remember. It's always been something that in my line of work we had to do. Remember in the good old days when you drive around in Alberta, especially at night, and you'd see flares everywhere? That's because we had pump jacks all over the countryside. And every time there's a pump jack, the pump jack's also making a little bit of methane, right? A little bit of natural gas. And we used to use the natural gas to run the engines that ran the pump jacks. If you ever went by there, you'd see those Aero engines just chugging along. And then somebody said, well, we got to capture that methane. Instead of just burning it, we got to capture it. So we went through all sorts of efforts, right? We built pipelines. I mean, and the methane we were burning was uneconomic. And trust me, if ever it's economic to preserve a resource, the industry will do it. Like, you don't have to tell an industry to do it. If something's worth something, they will capture it. If it's not worth anything, they will dispose of it as a waste. So this flaring that was going on everywhere, we reduced it. Drive around the countryside right now, you barely see any flares because we've found new technologies. and we've gotten the emissions so low that I don't know how they're going to keep lowering them. At some point, you lower them so much that it becomes diminishing returns, we call it. So I just saw that note, that announcement. I still don't understand why Danielle is so set in collaborating with Carney. I mean, she's convinced that she can get us a better deal, and so they made that announcement yesterday, which hides the fact that the MOU and the MOU that was signed, just before the new year there, the MOU that was signed in October, parts of that MOU come into effect on April 1st. On April 1st, the industrial carbon tax in Alberta goes up. And it doesn't matter if it's an industrial carbon tax or a commercial or a private citizen's commercial carbon tax. A tax is a tax is a tax, and somebody's going to pass it on to us. So if industry has to pay an increased carbon tax starting on April 1st, somehow or other, it's going to trickle its way down to us. And we're already, I mean, we're paying $1.70 for a liter of gasoline at the pump, and now the cost is going to go up on April 1st. That makes no sense to me. I have no idea. So the MOU, so the MOU was a nothing burger. It resulted in us suddenly getting suckered into increasing our commercial carbon tax, and now we got this additional statement of understanding that we're going to reduce our methane emission, and meanwhile we're no closer to getting a pipeline. I haven't seen anybody step up and start building a pipeline anywhere anytime soon, because it's and we'll come back to the pipeline. All right, got another call on the line. Name, where are you calling from, please?
Hi, Marty. It's Pete from Sturgeon County.
Hi, Pete. Sturgeon County, close to a refinery or not?
Very close to the refinery. I live in the country, so really close to there. I'm phoning because I got a question for you, and the question is, do you really trust Danielle? Let me preface that. I like Danielle. I think she's done a lot of good for Alberta, but I'm not so sure I trust where she's going in the direction that she's going. And the reason why I say that is because I'm originally from Quebec, and I was born and raised there. I voted in the first referendum. I lived through a lot of this garbage. I was glad to leave there because I grew up English in Quebec. We had the French police come around, and not a good time. I joined the service. I ended up in Alberta, fell in love with Alberta, and I chose to stay here. And so right now I take Alberta. I made a mistake in 1980. I don't plan on repeating that mistake. And right now I just think it's time for us to get out of Dodge.
Stay on the line, Pete. So just clarify, what was the mistake you made in 1980? How do you, was it that you voted the wrong way, or you didn't fight harder, or what do you think?
Oh, I voted the wrong way. I should have listened to some friends and voted yes to leave. I voted no, because when you get in that referendum ballot, that referendum box, or whatever you want to call the poll,
yeah,
you stand there for a little extra longer, and then you start to think, holy cow, I have an effect here that could create such huge, like an earthquake within Canada and the Federation, that you sit there an extra minute to wonder what you're going to do. Well, I voted no then. Now, I would most definitely go. For sure.
Thanks for that comment. I mean, I just got a bit of a goosebump, because you're saying something that I've been warning people about, right? You've heard me say on the show that collecting signatures right now to trigger a referendum, I think that's the easy part, and we got a lot of people. I think convincing, getting around the fear that you just mentioned exactly. When you're in that box, that ballot room, and you're going to check off, that's a bigger decision. So thanks for confirming that some people had cold feet, and I'm glad you've changed your mind. So back to your original question. My answer regarding Danielle Smith really changes almost from day to day to day. You can ask me how I feel about her one day, and I'll say I love her and I love the direction she's taking us. Then she'll do something, and then you ask me the same question the next day, and my answer is different, right? I'm having a hard time figuring out where she stands. I'll tell you a couple things. I mean, I'm disappointed in her as a conservative. Some days I really don't think she's being very conservative, and with some very specific things, right? Our government is still too big, and she's struggling to bring it under control and shrink it. The fact that we run these big deficits, that the spending seems out of control, that part upsets me. But I understand that. But then she'll do something like she did yesterday, where she does move the province in the right direction, generally speaking, right? So yesterday she passed a law that if you're a criminal and a repeat offender or whatever, and you have a bracelet or an ankle bracelet or something, and then you get closer to somebody else, there's going to be an app and an alarm, and I haven't gotten into the detail, but she's getting tougher on crime, let's say. So I like that. She's getting tougher on immigration. She's getting tougher. She's protecting the children, right? I absolutely love that she's protecting our children by making it harder for parents to transition their kids and do things like that. So you know what I'm saying? So on a lot of things, she's going in the right path. And I definitely do not want to slow her down when she's doing that, because it's all useful. I wish she was more conservative and taking control of the finances and stuff like that. But ultimately, to your last question, to your actual question, do I trust her? At this point, I don't trust too many politicians. So I put more weight in a politician's actions than I do in their words, which is why I love Donald Trump. So does that answer your question? Let me add, so do you trust her, or what's your thought on it?
Well, my first impression of Danielle was she was a fantastic premier. And I still think she is. And I agree with what you're saying, but she's flip flopping a lot.
Yeah.
And I really believe that originally what happened was she created all these lines in the sand that she gave to Carney. You cross this line and we're going to do this. There'll be a price to pay. We never knew what that price was. And she did that, about 3 times, I think. I think she cornered herself with the AGM in November, and she had to come up with something. It was either that or really challenge Carney. And they both came up with the MOU thing, which we all know is absolute garbage. It'll never happen. And all it's going to do is raise our taxes further and increase inflation. So, no, I right now, it's not only that, she's trying to do the same thing that like Yann did, which was with the Parti Québécois, which is the nation within a nation. It doesn't work. And what happens there, because I lived through this, is they'll make concessions, and as soon as the party leaves, so once the Parti Québécois was gone, then they go back and revert back to their normal ways of doing business, and it just doesn't work. And if that's the road that Danielle's going to go, she's in for a surprise, and so are a lot of Albertans. And it's sad, because I really think Alberta has massive opportunity to do something good here. Why not take a maiden voyage,
No, stay on the line, because I want to ask you a couple of questions. But back to Danielle, there is one good thing that I really like that she gave us in the last little while, though, and that is this Citizens Initiative Act, right? So she gave us the tool to do this petition, and that'll be a big test for me, for her. If she totally respects the law that she passed the way she said she will recently, if we collect 177 or whatever, 200,000 signatures, and she's like, yeah, I'll give you the referendum, that'll be a step in the right direction. But I just want to go back. I noticed the way you say Parti Québécois. So you do speak French, and I just want to ask, we started the show talking about bilingualism. Couple of questions. Do you still speak French? So you kept your French. If you kept your French, was it a choice, or was it because you felt that, or because the government made you do it? Why'd you keep your French?
Oh, I think that was more of a choice.
Yeah.
That was also beaten into us.
Yeah.
Not to mention, I was a kid then, so yeah, if you wanted to go out with some French girls, whatever, you had to learn the language.
Right. So you're pragmatic about it. Yeah.
Getting back to what you were saying earlier with regards to the hypocrites, because I'm going to call them what they are. They are hypocrites. When we were growing up, there's another interesting one too. You're probably going to hear soon a lot of stuff that there's going to be a lot of businesses that are going to be anxious to want to leave Alberta and so on. And that this is what happened in Quebec and so on and so forth. But the reality is, in Quebec at the time, was there were a lot of head offices in Montreal. And they came up with Bill 101. And it was Bill 101, which was the language stuff, that actually caused a lot of the head offices to move to Toronto. It wasn't so much the referendum. So I don't buy that logic.
That's
at that time, they shoved us all into, like, the English people into like 1 or 2 schools. That was it. And even when you wanted correspondence in English, they would send you everything in French. So you would have to do 2 tax forms in Quebec. You would have to do the federal tax and the Quebec tax, and it was all in French. And so, yeah, even though you would ask for it in English, you wouldn't get it in English half the time.
Yeah, no, thank you. Okay, well, that's awesome. Yeah, Quebec, you great point on the language. So you're saying the language law scared more businesses away than the referendum. I probably agree with that, and it does bring up an interesting point. Quebec is almost officially French only and goes out of its way to make life miserable for Anglophones over there. So they play the card both ways, right? Locally at home, they promote French, and then discriminate against the English, and then federally they scream when they don't get their way. So I appreciate the call, Pete. Thanks. Hey, is he gone, John, or is he? Oh, he's still there.
I'm still here.
Hey, just lastly, for the other people listening, how's the independence movement in your neck of the woods? You see a lot of flags, a lot of pop-up stations. What's the general sense in that part? Because we always hear bad things about Edmonton kind of being lost cause.
I think Edmonton's a lost cause. Actually, it's pretty quiet. It seems to be subdued, though it seems to be picking up. And yeah, I'm hopeful. I'm really hopeful for Alberta, because I think it would be amazing to create your own country. And this is the best province in the country as far as I'm concerned. I got here during Ralph Klein, then I was posted away, and I fought to get back. And Ralphie was good. Yeah. So yeah, I think Alberta has a lot of opportunity.
Excellent. All right. Thanks for calling, Pete. I'm just reading some of the comments. Somebody said I said New Zealand twice. I don't know what that means. Maybe I was referring to New Zealand and Australia, and I said New Zealand twice. Those are the two countries right now that are getting really, really close to having to ration fuel and things like that because of their bad decisions. Staying on the topic of Danielle, another interesting announcement that came out of the Smith government this week. The province plans to close Edmonton's remaining safe consumption sites and others as it shifts towards recovery-focused models. So I guess that means that they finally realized, and it's always amazing that governments take so long to realize what most of us take for granted as common sense. Who thought that handing out hard drugs to people was a good way to help them rehabilitate? Like I'm just glad they're slowly reversing that whole bad policy. Where else I got? All right, well let's. I still got a couple of topics, so give me a call, folks. Otherwise, you're going to make me. You're going to stretch my ability to talk on point on one topic. Quick update on the gun compensation program. We've talked about this one quite a bit in the last few weeks, and maybe this will be the last time we talk about it in this format. But remember, the minister, I call him the chickmunk. I don't even know his name. Actually, I got to be careful. Got to be careful about my statements online now, because Bill C9 passed in the House of Commons this week. So it went through past its third reading, right? The supposed anti-hate bill passed. So now it's just going to the Senate, which I think is just going to be a rubber stamp. And that's going to be a very impactful bill for people like me, for others here at the Western Standard, for me as a private account on X or whatever. I have to start watching what I say, because I don't want some cop knocking on my door in the near future because of a post I've made online. And speaking of cops knocking on the door, I'll come back to that one. But I got a caller on the line. Go ahead. Name, where are you calling from?
Hello, Mr. Marty. This is Gail calling from Red Deer area.
From where?
Red Deer.
Oh, Red Deer. I was just there yesterday.
Yes, I'm one of the blessed people who lives in the middle of everywhere.
Right on, right on. So what's on your mind?
I need, because I know that you are very proficient in explaining things in simplistic terms, Please educate me in why, within a 12-hour period, gas on the other side of the world has an issue and our gas at the tanks go up. I know it has something to do with the economic price in futures and gas and all of that, but I need a very simplistic answer because I'm very simplistic.
It's unfortunately it's supply and demand, and the world needs 100 million barrels of oil every day, and because of the and because of what's happening in the Gulf right now, the supply is reduced by about 30 million barrels. Like it's a big, big drop. And because there's a big drop, everybody's stepping over each other trying to buy oil, and the sellers are jacking up their prices. So as we just said, you got countries like the boats are stopped, the oil's not flowing, so whoever it's a market right now. So some guys like, I'll offer you $80, and the other guy goes, I'll offer you 85, and I'll offer you 90. So the price is just going up and up and up and up. And even though we're half a world away and we make more oil than we need here, our guys, I don't blame them for doing this. They are selling their oil at a higher price. So some of the oil that's being produced here now is going to make its way to Houston and make its way to Vancouver and get on boat and go to those buyers who are paying premium for it. And because they're paying a premium for it, our guys locally are having to compete for it. So the refinery that makes our gasoline, it's a competitor. It has to buy oil from CNRL or Cenovus or Suncor or whoever. They have, some refineries have their own oil, but some don't. And so it's just what's happening right now. And we're all, I wish there was a control on it, but at the end of the day, I'm a libertarian. So I take the pros and the cons. I'm happy when I can't be happy when the competition makes things go in my way. So once in a while, extra, when there's someday we'll go back to having too much oil, and when there's too much oil, one guy they'll basically dump the oil, and it'll go down in prices, and I'll benefit. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's pure supply and demand at this point.
Actually, that is very good clarification. So basically, they are bidding on future supply.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No.
Okay.
And so, and sometimes some people will say, well, the oil that's being produced today will get sold in 3 weeks from now. Sure. But yeah, they're anticipating, and vice versa. As fast as it can go up, it can go down. I worked on, I think I talked about this on one of the shows earlier. A barrel of oil that goes into, you're in Red Deer, but if you're closer to Hardisty, that's where the start of the Keystone Pipeline is. A barrel of oil that goes in the Keystone Pipeline at Hardisty, it takes about 27 days for it to get all the way down to Houston. So somebody in Houston is ordering that barrel of oil like weeks in advance and paying a price, trying to anticipate what they're going to make with that. So it's very complicated. And it's easy to kind of want to blame them for gouging us and profiteering, which they are. I mean, they are. But we live in a free market, and that means sometimes things don't go necessarily our way. But great question. Hope actually yesterday in Red Deer, I tweeted out about this. I mean, I paid $1.44 for gasoline at the Costco, and then as I was driving around and I went to my event in Red Deer, I saw it as high as $1.76. So when there's a gap like that in one geography, then you know that somebody's trying to gouge somebody else, right? So. Like anything else, shop it around, folks. Yeah. Thanks for the call. Great question.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Unless you have a follow-up.
Well, actually, I did. Okay. So I need an education on the difference between sweet gas and sour gas. And I have one oil pump on my property and 2 gas lines.
Okay.
I'm just kind of curious as what is flowing through, and if there's ever a time that I could take a straw and just siphon out what I need rather than going to town and taking it.
Yeah, no, never do that. All right, I'll let you hang up and I'll answer that question again real quick. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, so we in Alberta, we produce a lot of natural gas, right? And when we refer to natural gas, it simply means the gas is coming out of the ground. But what's coming out of the ground? The natural gas that comes out of the ground for us is a whole mixture of stuff. So it's generally speaking, it's methane, ethane, propane, butane, and some heavier stuff. It has often has helium, nitrogen, carbon dioxide, and hydrogen sulfide, and sometimes even other things. It even has mercury. It has also, so it's a mixture of usually like 10, 15 compounds. They're all more or less gaseous at room temperature and atmospheric pressure. So that comes out of the ground, and then it goes to all the what we call gas plants. You see the gas plants north of Calgary here. The Crossfield gas plant is a plant that takes that gas and then separates it into its different components. So the methane goes out separately, and it's used for burning in your furnace. The ethane, it's a nice molecule. We ship that all up to Edmonton, and we turn the ethane into ethylene and things like that. The propane, you guys all know what you use propane for. It's used to dry grain. It's for your barbecue. It's heating homes. Propane's nice because it can be liquefied and transported by truck. And then we take out a bunch of butanes, and the butanes, they also go to Edmonton, and they make things like whatever, plastics and butadiene and things like that. The carbon dioxide, we ship that up in the air. Unfortunately, now they're making us try and capture that and put it back into the ground, right? So there's carbon dioxide that's in the gas. We're also going to, and then the last one, which we call the sour component, is the hydrogen sulfide. And so when you have a gas well on your property and it's got sour gas, you'll have a little skull on the sign with the name of with the location and the emergency phone number, because the H2S, what we call the sour component of the natural gas, it's toxic, and it doesn't take a lot to be harmful to people. So be very careful. I always liked working around H2S because it gave us a heightened sense of awareness, and we were a little more careful. One thing I didn't like is I found a lot of guys that worked around sweet gas would get a little complacent, and it's like, no, they're both equally dangerous. But so that, I like the sourness because it really puts you on your toes. Yeah, good. Another good question. God, we're blessed in this country. We are so blessed with not this country, this province. And I love that too. Right, Carney this week saying again, he's repeating something he said last week. Canada can supply the world with oil. No. It's not Canada's oil. The Resource Transfer Act of like 1930 made sure that it's our oil, it's our resources. So it's Alberta's oil. Saskatchewan produces quite a bit of oil, and British Columbia not so much. But I love when Carney talked about Canada's oil, and it's not. All right, so hopefully somebody else calls. We got a couple more minutes on the show, but I was joking about somebody coming to knock on my door and arrest me for saying something unpopular. And I think that's when I look at what's going on in Europe right now, that's a reality. People are getting arrested for their posts on Facebook. And I think with C9, that could potentially come down the path for us, right? And then the other thing that could happen down the path in terms of people knocking on our doors is the gun confiscation program. But I'm less worried about that one, to be honest. So just wanted to repeat, we keep getting those letters. I got another one last week. It's the third one that I've received in third one I've received from the RCMP in the last month, right? It's a letter they keep sending to us, reminding us that that if you want to take part in the compensation program, you need to register before March 31st. In other words, they don't know, they banned a whole bunch of firearms, but they don't know who has those firearms, because for the longest time, we didn't have to register our firearms. So if somebody bought I'm going to pick a model. I know that the Ruger Mini 14 is on the list of banned firearms. Forever and ever, up until 2021, anybody could buy a Ruger Mini 14. It's known as a ranch rifle. It's just a short little semi-automatic. It was perfect to fit in a pickup truck. And when you're driving around the back on the ranch, on the farm, if you saw a coyote over the distance, you grab your Mini 14 and then you quickly stop your truck, got out, put a clip in there, shot a couple of times, and took care of that coyote. Well, the Mini 14 became prohibited in 2021. But the problem is there's thousands of them in the hands of Canadians, and they don't know who owns them. And so they want us to pre-register in this program and tell them that, hey, guess what? I have one of these things. And then in so doing, we register for the compensation program, which is a joke. So everybody, I keep advising this. It's not my legal advice, but I don't think it's a good idea to register for this program. And people seem to be following, thinking this along the same lines as me, because only about 20,000 firearms have been registered for this program, which expires on March 31st. So the minister has a problem on his hands, because after March 31st, he's going to have to figure out where the other 650,000 banned firearms are. So people are not complying with his rule. And that's why I said I'm not worried about him coming and knocking on my door. If he wants to come knock on my door and do an inventory of my firearms, that's not going to look good on the news for him. Go ahead, caller on the line. Where are you calling from? Name, please.
Hey, Marty, my name is Roger. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, perfectly. Go ahead, Roger.
Oh, nice. Awesome. First of all, I'm such a big fan of yours. I've been following you just kind of on the different podcasts that you've been on, and I think you're speaking a lot of truth. Like, I really believe in what you're saying. I think, the last 10 years have been really tough on every Albertan. Like, it's just kind of, I won't swear, but it's been really crappy for all of us. I think, the resource theft and just A through Z, it's just, in my opinion, it's just too big a country. Like, I think, I'm born and raised in Alberta. My parents are East Indian. They came here in 1972. My father started with nothing. That's kind of our story. And he built himself up. It's the story of a lot of Albertans that have been here. And, I think the more I've thought about separation, especially these last couple of years, that's my opinion, is just the country's too big. My question to you is, can you speak to the business owners and the people that do business in not just Alberta to Canada, but in your mind, what does that look like? Like, how does that relationship change if separation is going to go through? And again, thank you so much for being such a proponent of this. I think you're a wonderful voice, and I really love hearing what you're saying. Thanks so much.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for calling, Roger. First things, in the tour this week, I've been sitting down with one of the guys speaking with us is a guy named Fergus Hodgson. And as part of his talk, Fergus brings up a really cool concept, which is the fact that countries around the world have come and gone, and bigger countries have shrunk into smaller countries. And he brings up an interesting statistics that, sort of up until about World War I, World War II, like in the interwar periods, we had something like 60 countries around the world. So big, what do you call them? Kingdoms and big areas, right? England built a big empire, and Europe was bigger countries and stuff like that. And then today around the world, there's over 200 countries. So in the same surface, there's 3 times more countries than there used to be 50 years ago, which kind of points to your comment, which is some areas become too big to manage. And just by geography, you end up having regions that have really different interests, right? And I think we see that clearly in Canada, right? So the local interest of somebody in Atlantic Canada is probably more focused on, I'm going to be, very generalist here, but they're more interested, let's say, in fisheries and their aging population, and we're more interested in the fact that we have a younger population, and our focus is oil. So it's very different focuses, different geography, different climate, different realities, right? So I have longer distances to travel, and I'm doing it on dirt roads or doing it on paved roads. I need guns because I need to control predators and so forth. So the geography automatically leads to cultural differences and automatically leads to different interests, and it becomes hard to manage. And I think that's the pure example of what's happening in Canada. We're just too big. We're just too big to manage. And so we need to break up. The second part of your question, though, was the businesses. And, we had one caller earlier say that in Quebec, some businesses were scared away because of the language laws and whatnot. I'll say this about it. In fact, I won't beat around the bush. I don't think we can scare any more businesses away than we have, right? So here in Alberta, we've scared away the capital. The bad policies of Ottawa have made it such. I've lived it personally, right? As a senior manager in oil and gas, like companies, banks from around the world and investors don't want to invest in Canada in general and not in Alberta. They don't want to build anything here. Danielle Smith says it all the time. We can't even attract somebody to build a power plant here. Nobody wants to build a power plant. So across the country, I don't think we can scare business away more than we have. That's the first part answer to your question. So then after that, businesses invest in areas. When businesses invest, they're only thinking about 2 or 3 things. A business at its core will be, do I have a market? Is there somebody who wants the product that I have? And can I do something profitably? So that's the number one thing. So if I spend $1, can I make $1.10? So that's the first thing the businesses think. The second thing they think of is, how quickly can I do that? Because the value of money, if I invest $1 today, but it takes 3 years before I break even on my investment and I even start making a profit, I'm not going to go there. So that's the risk. And the risk is they look at risk of, will my customers disappear? Will the laws change? Will whatever. So if you think of the way a business thinks, they don't want to invest here in Canada and in Alberta because the risk and the timing is scaring them. So an independent Alberta can easily address those problems by saying, come on in and we'll make sure we speed up the timeline so your money starts working for you quickly, and we'll set a framework of rules that you can understand and you can manage your risk. In fact, that's an interesting thing about risk, is that companies can generally adjust to a lot of risk as long as they know the rules. I used to do this all the time. I don't really care about the rules. If you tell me the rule is I need to do this, as long as I know that the rule is not going to change constantly, I can adjust. I'll decide if I can meet the rules, if it's not too risky, and if I can stay profitable. So it's not the rules per se that scare investors. It's the fact that the rules are changing constantly. I don't know if I hope that makes sense, but so Alberta.
Oh, it does.
Yeah, so Alberta could be a very a common sense Alberta will attract a lot of investors.
Well, and Marty, I'll leave you with this. This always blows my mind, is that Alberta is like the 4th and 5th in the world in terms of the amount of oil that we have deposited. And look at these countries that we're comparing ourselves to. You look at the UAE, Saudi Arabia. You know, if you're a citizen of those countries, you get meaningful benefits. A good friend of mine is from UAE, and when he gets married, the government gives him $100,000 because they're trying to encourage, citizens to get married. I think, Alberta separation is an unlock to a ton of wealth for the people that live here, and I think that's why Ottawa is here. Marty, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being the voice of this movement. And again, I'm just a big fan. So great to talk to you.
Appreciate it. Thanks for calling. All right, folks. Okay, well, I'm glad a few more of you were brave and called. Maybe the secret is picking a topic that's a little more controversial. I don't know. I'm happy with today's show and the questions you guys gave me. Awesome questions. Let me know in the comments what I can do differently, what topics you'd like us to cover. I see we're running out of time. I'll do my quick. Thanks to the Western Standard for giving me a platform and allowing me to share my message. And shout out to them. Make sure if I've said this before. All medias are a little bit biased. That's fine. The Western Standard might be a little more right-leaning. I'm definitely more right-leaning. All medias are biased, but a media like this is not in a conflict of interest because it's not getting money from the government. And so we're capable of reporting on any issue we want because the money for us here, for the Western Standard, comes from you guys. And so we work for you guys and we will report what you want to hear. Whereas the CBC works for the government because that's who pays them. So they're in conflict of interest. And so that said, we can't do this without your support. So if you're not a member of the Western Standard, I encourage you to become a member. Go to www.westernstandard.news. It's $10 a month or it's $100 a year. And hopefully you guys will be back next week. I'm here on Thursdays at 1:00. Looking for, like I said, it's your show. So make sure you call in. All right. Cheers, folks.